eights can have this large external impact on everyone around them and the world, but internally can feel so small. Like being touched by anything out there is not even something I'm aware of. Like everyone needs something from me, but I don't need anything from anyone.
8 is dissociating to reject, to stay separate. And so there's
Mhm.
this underlying separateness theme happening that really gets overlooked in the popular understandings of 8.
And I don't think people really fully understand how separate eights can feel, even from themselves.
The big hormone Enneagram.
Let me lay it on the line. I got a little freakiness inside. Let you know that the man has got to deal with it.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres 4 with 5 wing, 458 trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9 with a 1, 974 trifix.
What up? It's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing-7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4, with a 369 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
Yeah, I recently posted 2 different memes. Like one today that actually got the account
Shut down.
shut down for a while. This happens, so it'll come back, I think. But it was like, this guy will die for my homies or something, and it's like these 8s, like, and I said this is social 6, and these guys who are clearly
Sixes.
6s,
Came in.
clearly 6s, being like, no, that's 8. It's like,
Yeah.
no, you're not. So yeah, I want to get into that. And then what was the other one?
The other one you posted was
it was like,
eights
protecting the
protecting the
innocent.
underdog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not the kings of doing that. That is
No.
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 absolute bullshit. As a person with a mom who's an 8,
Yeah.
I call the biggest bullshit.
Yeah, it's like as long as you're in line with what the 8 wants to happen, and
Right.
they'll fucking make sure that you're okay. But as soon as you fucking start going in different directions, I don't know you.
No.
Yeah. I mean, it's rejecting any, like, even like for a really unhealthy 8, like there's no like plug, there's no connective tissue to like that nurturing function at all. It's like that gets totally severed, and there's no like adapting. Like that's
Yeah.
like the protecting the underdog. It's like that concept of what the underdog is changes by context and situation.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, is like being able to sort of see and like oneself in that position of weakness or vulnerability relative to some other order outside oneself.
Oh yeah.
I was going to
that's-
say there's
that's
like a
good.
lack of like empathy and ability to connect to the actual quote unquote underdog.
Yes, that's
Mhm.
a really good point. It is that 8s are assuming that everyone else is coming from at life the same way they are, so it's hard to identify or empathize with other people's
Struggles.
yeah. It's like, just fucking pick yourself up and do it. And it's almost like if someone can't do that, it's like if I'm helping you, it's sort of correct something that I think is wrong in terms of you should be standing on your own 2 feet. Uh, and I can't. It's hard for me to see uh that aspect of people, that it's like, oh, you just can't stand on your own, like, because eights just assume that that's just the way it is. Everyone is on their own, making their own path. So it's a weird thing, like, protecting the underdog. That whole concept, it just does not fit that whole rejection stance.
I didn't know y'all were going to be triggering my mommy issues.
Oh yeah, let's get it. Let's
Cool.
trigger.
Cool.
Oh yeah.
It's also assuming that everybody is a big animal. You know what I mean? That's like, it's a fight, it's a combat or something. So it's even more rejection-y in that way, that, like anybody could turn on you like an animal or something.
Yeah, everyone's capable. That's
Yeah.
the internal message, and the protective thing is a weird where it's coming from. For 8, because I never saw the protecting the underdog thing. Could never relate to that.
Yeah. No.
Anyway,
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Big Hormone Enneagram. We are back in the hormonal polycule, and we are taking a break from Xander and Courtney's excellent insights into the lostness of attachment. And we'll be
It's
back
making
next week.
you lose
Yeah,
yourself
it's
right
making
now.
me lose myself. We'll be back with them next week. But today we are tackling a long overdue issue that has plagued the Enneagram community since these teachings became publicly available. So we are going to tackle the issue of 8 and not an 8 to go along with our not a 4 and our not a 5. We'll get into that in a second. Okay, some plugs. David has his Trifix guide, visual guide. I did an intro for it. We got some mail from a listener who really enjoyed it. People seem to really like it. It's very clarifying in terms of trifix and stems and these things. So you can get that on Enneagrammer.com. I have my book, not Big Woman Enneagram. What is it called? Essential Drives the
What is-
Enneagram.
Oh
What is
yeah.
it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's on bookshop.org or Amazon.com. Please leave a review if you've listened or read it or whatever. And then lastly, Emeka and I are on the Shift Network's Enneagram Global Summit. And Emeka's doing 8, I'm doing 5, 7, and I'm doing an instinctual presentation with Mario Sakura. Mario and I have very different views, and some things we kind of agree on, so might be interesting or might be terrible.
How is that going to work, real quick? As
How did
with
we
the
do
two
it?
of you, well, just being in such disagreement. If I may ask at this juncture.
It was very overview, and it was very like, here's John's take, and then here's Mario's take, and what we agreed on was like, trying to look at things from a point of view grounded in something scientific. Like we didn't like hash out our differences. It was like it was very weird that they have all these people, like they're trying to cram too many people on this thing, I think. Yeah, so anyway, it was good, and I mean, Mario actually gave me props in a way I appreciated, where he said that he hadn't connected that the instincts were like it was about attention, which like he was like, oh yeah, thanks. So he's all right. He's a pretty cool person, and even though we have different points of view. So yeah, so we have some links in the show description, different for Emeka and I, and if you, depending on like who you like better, sign up.
Or you can just use this different email address that you have to sign up for me as well.
Yeah, sign up for both of us, or I don't know, maybe Emeka can split.
I just don't want John to feel bad that I'm taking all the likes.
Yeah, that's true.
So
I will hate myself forever.
Because I'm clearly superior. So
Emeka!
You're not supporting the underdog, Emeka.
Yeah.
I don't believe in underdogs. Real quick, Dark Arts Academy. I did not know that this was a Harry Potter reference. Nevertheless,
Who's
sign
the
up.
underdog now?
Now you guys need to figure out what your Patronus is.
Sign up Enneagrammer.com, $19 a month. We just did Tyra Banks, who I did not like. So, we
Out
do
of
interest.
curiosity for myself, what is she?
She is a 6.
Really?
She's an interesting 6.
I would not have
Self-pres
seen that.
social.
Okay, interesting.
But yeah, you can watch how we arrived at that. We also recently did, Joseph had the idea of roasting people on Tinder, on his Tinder.
That's awesome.
People's identities are hidden, but we had fun doing that, so you can check that out as well.
John, did you get a chance to see that one yet?
Not yet. I'm excited for it though. So for listeners, it is our 100th episode coming up.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And so we humbly request your appraisals of us, your lavish praise, or your deep hatred and criticisms. And so please call on the love line and tell us if you like the show, if you hate it, what you like, any kind of shit that's interesting. We'll put it on the episode and talk about it. So the love line, 323 696 0647. So
and what's the email address if they want to record and just send a audio?
bhepodcast@gmail.com. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And then also people can just, if you can write out a voice message, something you want to set it and write it out, and then just read it and record a voice message, and you can send it on Facebook Messenger, or you can email it to bhepodcast@gmail.com, or you can even DM it on Instagram. I can still get it that way.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it, is to write it out first, because people lose their train of thought mid-sentence.
And I think that's probably why people don't send in love lines, because you got to call a number and then you got to collect your thoughts and spill something out. So that's probably the easiest way. Just write something out and record a voice note.
All right, well, let's get into it.
So I think what I'm going to do is, because I already did this shift talk where I try to organize everything that I thought people should know about 8. And my approach to it was kind of like, when I first got into the Enneagram, I had a hard time seeing myself in 8, because the material, I feel like, has been infected with a lot of attachment perspectives that I don't see in myself. And one of them being that whole protecting the underdog thing, where I just didn't understand where that was coming from. So my aim in the doing the shift talk was trying to share the key aspects of what it means to be an 8 that I wish was available when I came into the Enneagram. So I focused on stuff like the essential quality of 8, which is finally, I think, what really made 8 clear for me, and the type structure of an 8, and then just to address some of the things that I think the Enneagram community as a whole puts on 8, that really dehumanizes 8s. And I'm just going to give a real quick summary of kind of what I shared. I mean, when the shift talk comes out, people are going to hear all of it, but basically, I think one of the things that made a huge impact on me in understanding 8ness was really understanding like the essential quality of 8, and that sense of deadening that comes from disconnection from essential aliveness. And so a lot of the 8s are bossy and 8s are confrontational and this stuff, like 8s aren't existing and living their day-to-day lives identifying with that kind of stuff. That's way, way beneath. And so the core of the 8ness thing is this sense of deadening and this push for aliveness. And sort of the personality of 8 is this ignition switch that is always trying to turn on. And understanding that is like, okay, this is the core of what 8ness is. And when you see 8s and think, oh, that's a leader and that's someone who has no fear, this is where it's coming from. And also like to get into like how, as a body type, 8s are not really present, and there's a sense of dissociation that comes from this pushing.
Yeah.
And that's a huge aspect of 8ness that
Missing.
made it that's not there in the description. Is 8s aren't really paying attention. 8s aren't really fully there. We think about 9s as being the types that are dissociated, but I'm only seeing opportunities to expand and push, and so there's a very limited range of things that I'm going to respond to or even recognize. And so there's a way that 8s can. It's just that immediacy is what 8s respond with at all times. I wanted to paint a picture of how limited the type structure of 8s can be. And then the other aspect that I thought was really important is the rejection piece. I didn't really get into hexad versus attachment because I thought that was too much, but that separateness, like that need to like 8s aren't really with you, but they want to be at the center of the action. So it creates this the rejection self amputation, where I don't want to be with people, but I want to be at the center of some kind of explosion. And so that leverage that we talked about, where 8s have to bring something indispensable that can allow them to maintain their separateness, but be at the center of the action. So it's like, if I have leverage, then and you have to come see me, then I can be separate but involved.
I think you're hitting something really important, which is that we all recognize that 5 is like really separate and out in the middle of nowhere, like existentially in the void. But 2 and 8 are also keeping separation in different ways.
Yes.
And because unlike 5, which is double rejecting of the protective function and nurturing function, It's like they don't have any kind of like like when mountain climbers like stick in those nails or whatever to like stick into the wall. Like they don't have anything to stick into, but 8 sticks into the protective function. It anchors itself into autonomy and how to preserve their autonomy and how to and the expression of instinctual energies. And so as Emeka is speaking to, just like 9 is dissociating in a very overt way, 8 is dissociating, but unlike 9, which is an attachment type, they're disassociating to keep an attachment. 8 is dissociating to reject, to stay separate. And so there's
Mhm.
this underlying separateness theme happening that really gets overlooked in the popular understandings of 8. And this is how you can get a type that is so prone to just being like a fucking psychopath.
Yeah.
Like one thing that's interesting about typing, like trying to understand the Enneagram from the perspective of typing, is that you start to see things about the type structures once you get into certain fields that are dominated by certain types. And one of the things that I always thought was interesting is if you look at the list of dictators in history, they're like unanimously eights. And that's a really big deal
Hitler was a
because
sexual 4. Okay.
you know like it's a really big deal if you sit and think
Yeah.
about it, because it gives you a clue as to what the 8 type structure
Hmm.
when left unchecked can how it what it ends up doing. And so like that whole idea of 8s are psychologically sort of amassing leverage. um what happens when that goes unchecked, and you get a situation where, and it's not that, and one thing I want to point out is that it's not the dictator thing happens because partly because people around you see that you're someone who gets results for them, and so people are more likely just to hand over leverage and hand over um, power or control to someone who is getting results that are beneficial to them.
Hmm.
And in my entire life, it's kind of that whole rejection piece is, if I don't need anything from you, you need something from me.
Hmm.
And so it's similar to 2 and 5. 8s are feel like they have to bring something, and so if I'm getting results for myself and those around me start to lean on me. So now you take that and you multiply that, to amplify that exponentially. You have someone that more and more people are depending on, and because you depend on me, I have more leverage, and eventually I have leverage on everyone. I'm the only one making all the decisions. They're okay with that. You can understand like the 8 thing if you try to like make sense of why all these dictators are 8s.
One
Yeah.
thing that happens too with the dictators that feeds it is like that dissociation and the lack of attachment has 8s. One thing it does is it makes 8s characterize people as cartoons,
Okay. Yeah.
and so you can paint a whole group of people in the position of a dictator as all this one cartoon image of something negative or deplorable or something like that, and then that feeds the crowd,
That's true.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The rejection types 5, 8, and 2 are all offering something through the lens of their dominant center. So being
Hmm.
rejection, there's a self-severing some part of themselves. And so it's like, how do I enter into the human world? What do I
Yes.
need to offer something? I only know myself basically through a role, and that role is nurturing function, which is 2, protecting function, which is 8, or I don't know what I'm doing here, and everything is like bizarre and alien to me, which is 5. And then
Yeah.
reporting back on what I've seen because it's like, what is going on? So, yeah, so like what 8s are doing that get results for people is they are being the protective function, but they're
Yes.
being the protective function without being open. Sometimes it happens unconsciously, but without actually being open to the impressions that like being identified or including the
Yeah.
integrated nurturing function would provide. And so it's like, like something I see in 8s all the time is like not realizing how affected by people they are. So that they're either like feeling a connection for somebody or feeling affected or impacted, and it's getting to them, and their self image is like nothing gets to me. and then they realize something got to them, and then they like can cut that off real fast. And what that
Yeah.
does is it really further entrenches it entrenches the separateness. But again, it's like a separateness predicated on this expansive quality, so it can get really dehumanizing of other people really fast.
Yes. I think it's interesting that eights are self-amputating and in ways dehumanizing themselves, and kind of that's what people are doing to the type 8 description in a way, but by saying that, eights can't have these doubts and fears, and anytime you see like actual eights expressing vulnerability, or just being messy, or not even really having any leadership qualities, or just being fucking buffoons and idiots, people are like, that can't be an eight.
Right.
And it's like every fucking eight is this noble superhero.
Right.
um but my point, shit, I was trying to make a point about the self amputation.
I think you were getting at perhaps some of the suffering of eight.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. So yeah, one of the points I made is that for a type that can have such a big impact externally, because that's really where the attention is going, is I want to, like, even for eight to feel like a person, they feel like they have to bring something indispensable, and to expand that. So eights can have this large external impact on everyone around them and the world, but internally can feel so small, because like being touched by anything out there is not even something I'm aware of. Like, everyone needs something from me, but I don't need anything from everyone. Anyone. Like, that's kind of the baseline of what it means to be a person for an eight, is like, you need something from me, but I don't need anything from you. And so it can feel very limited and small internally, compared to what it might look like externally, in terms of how much the eight is pushing out into the world. Like, internally, it can feel very small.
That's one way that, like, my phrase, having a certain type in your back pocket, that's a way that eight has five in the back pocket. It's like five is this little insect or whatever, or
Hmm.
something like that. That's small, very small, and in some ways could be crushed. And so you're overcompensating for that.
Hmm.
Yeah, I like also the sense of like it. I mean, it's something I've been aware of, but haven't had that kind of language or concept for. But the like the this there is like a smallness that like sometimes of some eights that have like a real lack of like soulfulness. Like I mean, Trump's aesthetic is like profoundly like a 12-year-old's idea of what success and beauty look like. His idea of
Yeah.
beauty is very childish, and you'll see that in a lot of eights of their aesthetic sense or something like that is pretty undeveloped because they've just cut off this more, that what the nurturing function provides, which is like a lot of qualities of heart. And yeah, you'll see this kind, like, again, I keep connecting things to five. Maybe that's because my wing and fix and stuff like this. But one of the things people always talk about is eights being control freaks, and I don't find that really to be true. There is a control thing happening, but it's not like telling everybody what to do. It's like setting boundaries. And so, like,
Yes.
with five, avarice is like, oh, I'm only interested in X, Y, and Z, and so you want to talk or engage on, ABC. I'm not even gonna do it. I'm just gonna either like tune out or leave or call you an idiot.
Hmm.
Eight's doing the same thing. There's like really trying to
Hmm.
define the terms on which they'll engage. They're often shutting down different avenues where they could be touched that are just like unexplored.
Yeah, that's a huge distinction to make. I think boundaries is a huge word
Hmm.
for eight. I should explain that a little bit, because it's kind of like saying, similar to five, this is how I want to be. And if you're going to approach me,
Yeah.
there's a limited box of what I'm willing to do. And
Hmm.
I'm not veering out of that box. At least you're not going to make me veer. I mean, that's not even a possibility. Like, every sort of interaction with other people is a negotiation, is to, this is what I want, this is how I exist, and if you overlap with that, then we can work together. And so that whole idea of eights being bossy and controlling, it's kind of like, if you're within my box, then we're gonna have to play within a certain I don't know, like a strict
By my
uh, w-
rules.
yeah, you're gonna have to play. It's not necessarily. I don't even look at it as sense of rules. It's like there's just a few things that I'm willing to do, and if you want to engage with me or work with me, I'm not gonna do. I'm not gonna exist your way. Like there's just certain things to me that are unacceptable that I'm not going to do, and if we're going to work together or whatever it is, then I can wiggle to some degree, but there's just certain things I'm not going to do. And so it's self autonomy. It's like, that's it's about me. And if you're gonna come within my world, then you're gonna have to play along to some degree with that.
Yeah, and there's like a quality of negotiation at all times with eights.
Yes.
Like
Mm.
like it doesn't feel just like oh, we're just gonna have a conversation, and it's not, and and especially since we're contrasting it with like maybe like sixes, especially eight fix sixes or something, or some
Hmm.
nines that can see themselves as eights. There is no assumption of common ground,
Yes.
and so like it is like the negotiation thing feels really apparent. Whereas like sometimes you'll see people of other types who think they're eights or posture toward eight, trying to play like they're the negotiator, big cigar in the mouth type of guy, but they're really not. And it's very apparent that they're like
Yep.
compensating for not being that way. Whereas like it's just the air eight breathes
Right.
and they don't even know they're doing it.
Right.
Um, and this kind of also gets into something that I wanted to bring up for not an eight. That's like a big distinction that I see people mistake all the time, which is I'll see people characterize eight as angry.
Yeah.
Like they'll, especially like on these like Christian Facebook groups or
Hmm.
something, where they'll talk about their eight boyfriends or eight husbands or something like this, and characterize them as angry. It's like, first of all, I don't get that sense from eights that they're angry, and I don't think they're liable to identify as angry. Like I think that's a
Exactly.
nine. That's a
Yeah.
fucking nine. Where a nine is angry, and like sometimes they know it, and
Or a six.
or six. Yeah, that's true. But it's yeah, it'll be coming from a different place. Um, but yeah, eights have this like expansive pushy quality, but it's not. They would. What do people always say? They always say something like eights express their anger and nines like repress it or something.
Yeah,
And I,
it's
I think
just
that's just totally off.
yeah, it's just weird the kind of similar to what people do at 4 and 5, the kind of ways that they have to paint eight and cartoonish ways that they have to paint the A type structure to make it even more something to aspire to or something like that. And the ways they misinterpret like 6 or 9 to say, oh, eights express their anger, nines don't express any anger, or sixes are afraid of confrontation and they seek security. If you're someone who confronts other people, then you're an eight. It's like their sixes are more likely to be outwardly tough than you would see eights. I think eights more often fly under the radar because they're generally minding their own business. They're not going and starting shit with anybody. Like you're not eights are just about their shit. And it's usually sixes that are like wearing that chip on their shoulder of I'm tough. No one can do this. Like eights already know that they have autonomy. It's like
Mm,
they're already
They
in
don't
their
have to fight
corner
for it.
doing yeah, they're already in their corner doing their thing, amassing, leverage in their chosen area. It's like you're not gonna rock them because to play ball with an eight, you're gonna have to negotiate with them, and they're not worried. So
yeah.
it's like it's the sixes and the nines and that. I think look at eight, that whole toughness and strength of eight as something to aspire to.
Yeah. I mean, one thing we're saying here is like with 6 and 9, there's super ego pressure to be a good person. And
Hmm.
so what they're doing with type 8 is they're making 8 into a good person is one thing
Right.
we're saying. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
The point that you made, David, is really good one, and one of the things I think is a huge distinction. And it's very clear because I mean we do hundreds of typings a year at this point, and eights are pretty rare. Like you don't get that many of them. We get a couple of them a year out of hundreds of typings.
Hmm.
Uh, and one of the things that's really obvious about eights when they send in their typing videos is that they don't have any morality stake. And even that's even with eights that have,
Hmm.
six fixes and all that stuff, that
Yep.
there's no sense of morality in terms of hiding negative things about myself.
Mm.
And, sixes are provocative and sometimes aggressive types. But there's that sense of I still I'm expected to be a good person, and I think that's where that
Mhm.
protecting the underdog bullshit has seeped its
That
way
is.
into because eights. I mean, that's something let's get into now. Is I said this on one of the dark arts videos, is that I try to understand, like, where is the protective stuff for eight coming from, if I'm really being honest. And really what it is my perspective, and this is something I came out the womb with. I thought this is the way everyone else thinks, and it's not the case. Is that I have my box that I live in, my box of existence. This is the stuff that I care about, and I'm not gonna let anyone stop me from doing what I want to do. And so if you're in my way, I'm gonna run you over. So that's just kind of like, this is how life works. You are on your path,
Mhm.
and if anything is in your way, you're gonna run it over. That's what you're supposed to do. So if I'm going in a certain direction and I make some friends, I have family, and not to say that I'm connected to everyone in my family. There's a couple of people that I like in my family, and then I have people that are heading in the same direction I am, so we have similar aims. What happens is that I now to start to see my friends and people that are with me along this path as part of me. It's like an
Mhm.
extension
Mhm.
of my
Mhm.
own psych.
Mhm.
It's an extension of my own psychological territory, and this is where it's coming from. Is that if something touches John or David or Nancy, then it touches me by extension. It means that if you can touch them, that means you can touch me, and I'm not
Mhm.
gonna let
Mm.
that. I'm not gonna let that happen. There's
Right.
no way that I'm going to let you think that you can even get within 1 degree of separation of me. If you touch anyone within striking distance of me, I'm gonna kill you. That's the way. That's the way I look at it. So, is it protecting the other dog? It's not really, because it's like it's
It's
about
Because it's
protecting
me.
your
yourself.
people. It's
Yeah.
Yeah,
your
this
people.
it's about me. Like, you're not gonna touch
Yeah.
me, and which means you're not gonna touch someone standing next to me or the person standing next to them.
Yep.
Like, I'm untouchable, and if you want to find out if that's true or not, try me. But that's
Right.
kind of like the way I'm looking at it. So it's not. I'm not protecting the underdog. I'm protecting myself.
Right. Right. Yeah. What's funny is, like, so the way Emeka and I became friends was like arguing with other people online, and like, so I was living in Harlem, and you were visiting, I guess, and
Yeah.
you were like, uh, you hit me up like, hey, you want to meet up? And I always say no to everybody, but for some reason, like, okay. So we met, and like, Emeka in person, like, you have like a very like solid presence, but you're not like all these stereotypes that people make of eights of just like filling up the whole room or like dominating with your force or something like that.
No.
You're very like, a kind, attentive, person. And like meeting you, like, I thought you were an eight, but there was always like a little bit of like, I know that so many people think they're eights, come across as
Mm.
eight. I had that like just in my back of my head of like, all right, we'll just check out this if this guy's actually an eight. And pretty quickly it was clear you're an eight, but there are a couple moments where there have been things where something has touched one of us, and the way you go into lockdown is extraordinary.
It's
And it's
epic.
like, there is like some kind of hidden maybe to us or just me or other people,
Mhm.
but it's not always clear. But like there is some point where something gets touched, and it's like Emeka activates, and it is a wall. Like it is a wall against this thing. And there have been times when, like, especially, for just speaking for myself, like I've done something naive or assumed a better intention from somebody, and Amika's like, "This person is fucking evil," and like, do this, this, and this. We're gonna kick, like, we're gonna lock them out. Like they're gonna have nothing. And and it was like really, I mean, it was amazing because there were ways I was vulnerable that I didn't realize I was vulnerable. And so on one hand, there is this like protective quality, but I recognize it as like, oh, I'm in Emeka's like family now. Like we're a part, and so like part of the expectation is I'm gonna do the same for him in the ways that I know how. And part of it, I think, as eight, it's like you can correct me if I'm wrong, Emeka, but like I know you don't expect me to do eight shit for you because I'm not gonna do it right, but
Right.
I
Right.
can do it my four way.
Yeah. I mean, part of the thing is I don't expect anyone to be able to do that for me because it feels like I'm the only one who can see this shit coming, and it's always that the case because like H are the ones that are sort of scanning that what's the word that those scanning those boundaries. Like it
Right.
seems like not every what I feel frustrated by just with people in general who aren't eights is that they are very lax about boundaries and just that awareness of you need to be aware of what people are capable of that you allow into your space, like the what you allow to be able to touch you. And I need to know what anyone who becomes within striking distance of me, what they're capable of. And it's kind of like you in combat, to on an untrained eye, most people don't know when someone's about to punch. But if you've been trained in combat sports, like oh, that person's getting ready to punch. Like they are getting their foot in position and they're
Mm.
clenching their fist. And it feels like I'm the only one who can see that. It's like you're about to get punched in the fucking face. They're pulling the knife out, and you're like, "Oh, this person's just trying to say hello." No,
Right.
and so that's what it feels like. I don't expect anybody else to be able to do that for me. All I expect from the people in my life is to don't become a liability to me. It's like don't like some people just like like keep getting me mixed up into um just I guess vulnerable, putting me in bad positions. And so I don't expect everyone to see things the way I do. I mean, just very few people. I mean, eight's usually the ones that are overdoing this. I just expect people not to be liabilities to me. Don't fuck my life up.
And so, oh, one thing I want to distinguish this from is like I always get, these guys that claim to be eights, like especially on the Big Hormone meme account when I post something about the difference between 6 and 8. That usually seem to me like sixes or eight or nines or something, but they're very identified with the protector. They're identified with the my people thing and like my family first or whatever. And so how like what's another way we can distinguish this like sense of all right, like you're in my protective zone with 8 versus the sixes, you know, their version of my people.
Okay, even the word underdog, that is tapping into some moral goodness type shit
Yes.
Right.
that I don't think any eight is gonna relate to. I mean, of course, you've got people who always reference Martin Luther King. Oh, what about Martin Luther King? Okay, Martin Luther King was a black man. Okay, like it's not like he was going after. It wasn't like Martin Luther King was a white man who created a whole civil rights movement for black people.
Right.
Okay, like it's
Right.
it's 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 something that was beneficial to himself first, and of course, eights are psychologically expansive, and so that can just expand out into the world and become a whole movement. Same way with Hitler,
Mhm.
that didn't start out with I'm gonna. It started with the self first of all, and it just
Yeah.
expands from there.
Yeah.
The way I've been thinking about it is just psychological territory. That's the it. I have a
Hmm.
box, and if you are part of it, then like there's a box that I can't be touched. I can't be touched, and so it's kind of like protective of that, my psychological territory. And so I don't know if that makes enough of a distinction from what sixes are doing, because there's a sense of like my gang, my group, that really gets more with into like this sense of togetherness that isn't
Hmm.
happening with eights.
Well, and I think the much more conscious identification with like protecting my people. Like I think that like what we're speaking to with 8, it happens much more instinctively. It happens
Hmm.
much more,
Yes.
on the body level because it's a body phenomenon. Whereas with the 6, there's more self-image and consciousness involved with their
And
role.
There's
and
more should.
and yes,
Yeah.
righteousness and goodness, as opposed to 8 is like just animal justice or whatever.
Right. I don't know if this is going to be fleshed out enough, but I saw Dune with Alexandra and Courtney, and afterwards we were talking about how like that Paul Atreides character is a 9, and how there are all these, 9, like almost every hero's journey story is a 9. like
Mhm.
waking up to
Yep.
their value and their potential and their individuality, and they have to like make their own choices rather than being like the prince or the farm boy or the hobbit thing or whatever, or the
Mhm.
Harry Potter boy or whatever. And they have to like own their value. They get a wand or a lightsaber or a dagger. It's this whole thing about their
And that's the
masculine.
move to 3 also, is that then they, at the end of the journey, they get crowned and they're the star in some
Right.
way, or
They
yeah.
become the Jedi or the prophet or the Messiah or the whatever, the
Mhm.
special boy. Um or girl. But with the 8, like and tell me what you guys think, but like I always think I'm obsessed with Wolverine, of course. Like that's been my lifelong hero archetype character who is an 8. And like one of the things I see in these, like especially like maybe story arcs of hexad types, is where the attachment types waking up. It's like waking up to their own value and their own capacity, and to be able to like be a focal point. Whereas like the hexad types, it's like usually it's like some kind of archetypal story of having to give a shit about something.
Yes.
Like Wolverine, what I always liked about him is that he is already like a powerful character. He already like is very narcissistic, and he's already very self-focused and kind of sociopathic. And his whole arc and journey is like learning to care about people
Mhm.
and
Mm.
learning to be part of like the X-Men as like his like extended family unit kind of a thing. And like finding a place with other people. It's a journey of like basically humility, whereas like a lot of the attachment types, maybe 3 is modified with this a little bit, but it's like at least for 6 and 9, it's like growing into being the special one who can do it, who can wield the magic, who can individuate, who can do whatever.
That's huge, and
Yep.
I can't stress enough how much I think at least in my own 8 journey, and my dad's an 8, and I have a sister who's an 8, and uh, finding your own sense of humanity,
Hmm.
where it's like giving a fuck about other people or making space for other people to fit within your box. And I think the Enneagram has been this tool for me to understand people and to empathize with people. Because I mean, before the Enneagram and when I was a lot younger, I mean I'm already a dick. I already know that, but like I was like such a fucking dick because I didn't have any awareness of all the different ways that people could be that could also
Mm.
be valid to them. So it's kind of like, why are you so fucking stupid? Why are you so fucking, and I'd say that to people to their faces, because like, why are you why aren't you able to see this? Or just like my view on the world and the way things are, I couldn't, I was so limited in my empathy for how other people could be. Like discovering the Enneagram and discovering typology and all these, like, oh, there's equally valid but opposite ways that people can be, has helped me to see other people's humanity. And that's I mean, I don't think people really understand the inherent separateness that is, that's what kind of attachment types are struggling with types like 4, 5, and 8, or even just hexad in general, just not seeing how not human or not giving a fuck about what's going on for other people those types can be.
Hmm. Nancy,
Mhm.
are we triggering your mom trauma?
Yeah, a little bit. Um, I have I think my best friend is an 8 wing 9. So I'm trying to frame a lot of this based on our interactions instead of my interactions with my mom, because when I do that, I get really angry. And I hold a lot of anger towards 8s because of her. But
Why is it? What, I mean, not to get too much into it,
oh
but
no,
just
so we can get into it. I don't care. There's just this inflexibility around the way to do things. But it's almost hypocritical sometimes, because I feel like if an 8 changes their mind about something, they're like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, like this is fine now. But you can never change an 8's mind, right?
oh yeah, yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
and that fucking pisses me off because, you know, you're gonna sit there on your high horse and tell me that you're right and you know everything, and then later on you're gonna be like, oh well, now I know everything and this is right, but you're never gonna go back and say that you were wrong.
Yeah. Yep.
But why would you go back and do that?
uh,
No apology.
yeah, never an apology. Yeah, no, I literally like this happened last week. I sat at my mom and I were sitting down for coffee, and I literally said, "I need you to say I am sorry for blank." Full stop. She said, "I am sorry for blank, but." I said it one more time, and I asked her to say it one more time, and she said, "I am sorry, but," and she like I could feel the inner just like push against that, just the inability to set aside her own personal
Mhm.
righteousness to um say I'm sorry, even if I don't think I'm sorry, or even if I don't think it's fair that you want me to be sorry, I am sorry.
That gets at one of my themes around the gut, which is knowingness in the body.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sense of knowing the way things should be, the way things are, that is nonverbal. And
Hmm.
so, because it's nonverbal, it's that much more of a fact in the gut type's body. And
Mm-hmm.
so, it's so incredibly immovable. And I mean, you
And
even see it with nines. Nines do it a different way, but it's more
right.
obvious and overt with eights and ones that they are right.
Mm-hmm. And
And
that's why
you
it's
can't make
so
it move.
important for all of the types, right? But you know, if we're speaking in just eight terms, it's so important for them to do work around feeling like what's going on in their body and naming it, I feel like.
Mhm.
Because if
Mhm.
you have that ability, you can go, yep, that's what I'm feeling, but in this moment that's not helpful. Or yep, that's what I'm feeling, and in this moment it is helpful. You have a bit of more of a choice about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Cause yeah, one of the things, I mean, that is coming up through this is the way in which eights can just like destroy their own lives or like the things that
Yeah.
are meaningful in an eight's life because it's
Mm.
like you get the short-term benefit of being on lockdown and protected and you know, whatever, but it really costs like relationships and like even if you have a lot of interaction, like there can be like absolutely no trust because the person will not feel seen at all and then not feel appreciated and then not feel like they're a person to the eight
Hmm.
because
Mm.
the eight can still like especially like a social eight can just be surrounded by people but nobody has any actual relationship with the social eight.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge.
Yeah.
My dad is a social eight, and
So
it's
was my mom.
just weird growing up because as a boy, I had so many vivid memories of my dad. I mean, he was a college professor, like, and he's always been like a big man on campus. Like, you know, people knew him, and he was important. And it was very obvious to me growing up that my dad was an important person to a lot of people. But you know, people just loved him out there. But at home, it was he was a tyrant, and just I didn't feel like I had any relationship to him, and so it was just weird to see this dichotomy of people just glamming onto my dad out there, but I felt like they don't actually know him, and I don't even know him. I didn't know anything about him, but people seem to like him, and so it can be this thing where, especially for like a social aid, someone who can just be so in the middle of what's happening with people, but you don't actually have a real connection to them, and that's part of the thing with the wall with eights. I've seen people come over to the house that didn't really know my dad, who were trying to get to know him for whatever reason, and they would just sit there and he would just ignore them completely. And you know, just this is a social type too. Just so there's this huge wall where I mean I don't really know very many personal details about my dad, and there are a lot of people who have connections to him who respect him, but probably don't really know anything about him.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah. I don't think social aids know that they do that either. Because, or well, I mean, some probably do, right? But for the most part, they aren't aware that they're Because the social eights I've met are very like love people, love being around people, outgoing, and they wouldn't view themselves as not having close friends
Right.
or not
Right.
opening up, but that's 100% what they're doing. Does
Right.
that make
Well,
sense?
they can sometimes sense like the people's reliance on them. They'll mistake for intimacy, or they'll mistake just people's like kind of neediness. Like sometimes people confide in them, and they might feel like that's closeness. There's a lot of things that like even a high social eight will think uh, equals connection, or and on some level they know that it's not, and they know that they're cut off from something, and that's why the pushing compensates, because it's like I'm cut off, so I push and I push and I push. But often social aids are unaware of to the extent that they're kind of like the godfather in the in the relationships they're in, that there's an exchange, that there is a role,
Mhm.
and that it is actually very impersonal. There's just not a shared humanity sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge distinction to look at the reason why so many attachment types are nines, sixes, and threes, mistype is eight for different reasons, and just that sense of I don't think people understand to the extent of how cut off eights are as a baseline. Not even like trying to be cut off. It's like this is what it means to be a person. Is like I'm not with you, but I have to be at the center of things somehow. And
Yeah,
so you get this sort of um, antisocial way that eights put themselves at the center of things by with
stirring shit up.
leverage, yeah, stirring things up. But you don't actually get any way in, any real personal way into the eight.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry to interrupt you, Nancy, but
You're fine.
but your thing about the not actually apologizing, that is actually like a really powerful tool for an eight, because to actually experience remorse, uh and to actually like try to perceive outside of how they think the interaction went or interactions go,
Mhm.
like that could be a real path for eights to grow, is to like actually like apologize and just like leave it at that. I thought that was a really
Mm-hmm.
good thing you narrowed in.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's always a but.
but I'm gonna negate this apology that I just started off
Yeah.
with.
Exactly, exactly. And it's just it just struck me as I was sitting there how much of a body moment that was. Like it was just like overpowering. I could feel it what was going on. I was like, I know exactly what's happening right now and you have no idea, which is
I,
very odd.
part of it is just kind of like and the A could see that they were wrong and think maybe I should apologize, but if it's not gonna happen if they want me to do it right now. It's like
Mhm.
I have to find
Mm.
it. I have to find it within myself, and if I bring the apology to you, that's one thing. But if you're
Right.
demanding
Hmm.
an apology from me on principle, I'm gonna upset you.
Right,
I have to set the
exactly.
terms. I have to set the terms.
Right.
Exactly.
Setting the
And
terms is a big deal for eights.
yeah, yeah, and I think what I struggle with the most with eights is just that, like I said, that inflexibility because I am so very flexible, not in good ways, right? I'm not laid back, let's be real here. But when I see someone so inflexible, it's like you selfish prick.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Like
mean that's exactly what it is.
yeah, yeah. And so
Yeah.
I see that and I just want to like smack them in the face and be like, fucking piece of shit. Like just bend. Just bend slightly.
Yeah, I mean I think it's people want to make the type eight into a good person, and one of the things that's really upset me sometimes is people mistyping as eights when presented with distinctions about what eight is, start to say that they've evolved and they're a
I'm a
healthy
Yep.
eight.
healthy eight. Yeah, I'm
Noth-
healthy.
Nothing pisses me off more than to hear that, because what they're saying in response to me indirectly is that I'm a bad person. I am a unhealthy,
Unevolve.
unevolved. I don't disagree with them, but that coming from them as a form of trying to reframe eight into something that it is really fucking pisses me off, because it's like it's some nine or some six who's like, well, I'm
Mhm.
a good person with good intentions and I protect the underdog and I do this. It's like these type structures are neutral
Mhm.
and they don't make anyone better. And that's one thing I
Yep.
see with like a lot of sixes who get into the Enneagram and identify as eight. They get a tattoo of eight on their arm, and it's like one of the
Oh
most
God.
one of the most disgusting displays of not understanding the Enneagram, that you would identify with the type and feel so good about it that you would put it on your body as in the form of a tattoo.
Yeah.
Or
No.
even better, that you would go as far as to start an entire podcast completely focused on your identification with type 8. These are examples of extreme not 8 behavior. First of all,
Yeah.
8s are not I part of that separation that 8s are identified with is the idea that there's a type that describes me. I would not take pride in confining myself
Yeah.
to a category.
Mm.
That is, every,
Yeah.
person in these Enneagram groups who are patting themselves on the back for being type 8 or whatever. If you feel proud about that category, that is the most non-psychologically expansive thing that you could
Yeah.
identify with.
And
Well,
it's like
it's
like
this-
the not a four thing.
Exactly.
Similarly. Yeah.
No, it's the same thing where people are always like, if I'm like, well, this thing that is that you're posting is like heavy, not 4. You go, oh, it's because you're a 4 and you just want to be special and unique. And I'm like part of why I got obsessed with the Enneagram was learning I was a 4, because I was like, I can't believe like I fit something that's a box
Exactly.
so well. And I don't like always then people literally have called me a sociopath because when people ask me what my type is online, I say I'm a sexual 9. And yeah, because they'll just think if I point out a distinction between 4 and anything else, because I'm just trying to be special with 4, and it's like the whole part of I think what's going on there is that, like, let's say you identify with 4 or you identify with 8, there's kind of like an attachment, like communicating where I'm at so you can meet me where I'm at thing.
Hmm.
It seems like it's going on there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think this echolocation thing that's happening online, but people take their identification so personally that they wear it as a badge. The whole phenomenon of wearing your type as a social badge of identity is an attachment thing. And what I
Mhm.
find a lot of times with 8s, I mean, there are 8s that are interested in typology and get identified with stuff and get really upset or whatever else. But there's always going to still be this sense where me is separate from my type. And a lot of 8s don't even play the game, or they'll may get typed, or I decide on a type and they'll move on. Like there's not much juice for them
Mhm.
in the identification game with this is me. Like, because the type structure of 8 is so expansive. How could I possibly be contained in this type description? That feels so limiting to the type 8 personality. Like an 8 will take their personality and go focus on something much bigger, or that could become very big. A type is very small, it's very limited.
Hmm. So, one thing.
Darth Vader is with us.
Was it loud?
Yeah. Was it loud?
For a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
So, a piece of this is I'm wondering how we can distinguish an 8 fixer from not an 8 fixer, because that's another thing
Oh,
that
yeah.
happens a lot.
Mm.
It's just like I think if I'm tough or direct, or if I'm whatever, that makes me an 8 fixer.
Okay. I think one of the things that I've said about 8 fix in general is that it gives permission, whatever you've got going on, to just let it fly. Immediacy. It just, yeah, whatever. Like, okay, John's a 4 wing 5 with the 5 fix. His 8 fix just, like, for example, John would start
Full
talking about,
permission to be that.
yeah, like he'll take his Egypt stuff and just go on a fucking 10-minute rant. And he's learned to check in, are you with me? But
Yeah, but
before,
that's a learned skill.
right,
Let's be very
before
clear.
John would just go.
Yes. This is my ride.
And so, like, the 8, anyone who has an 8 fix is yeah, they're gonna take you for a ride, because they're, whatever it is that they've got going on, that 8 fix just gives it permission to let it fly.
Yeah, that's something Alexandra has pointed out is like my lustfulness, and I just didn't. I have the 4-5 self image of kind of being like barely here, but like I kind of like will push to escalate things all the time, or like just another drink or another, all right, we're gonna hit this place and this place, like dancing or whatever. It's like we're gonna push it here, we're gonna keep going here, and there's this sort of like kind of carried away by my own momentum thing that I do. That yeah, I don't know if one fixers or nine fixers do that.
They don't. It's
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it's a different thing with any eight fix. Is kind of like the foot's always on the gas pedal, always looking for opportunities to step on the gas. That's what it feels like to me anyway. Just um ready to go. Like, and one fix can be it's assertive in a different way, but there's a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, like that sense of we have to find a right, that in sense in the body there's a right way to do things, that sense of alignment. And so it's assertiveness in a different way, whereas aid is just kind of like a blunt force push,
Yeah.
more, like whatever avenues we have to escalate things, take it to the next level. That's what aid fix is going to do.
Yeah, my good friend is a 1 and 7 fixed for the 3 wing, and he's a bartender, and so like he will do stuff like if he feels offended by a customer, like he hates bartending, and he'll throw them out, and he'll be really indignant, and like I kind of like, oh, what was that about? Like there's this idea that like sometimes that having an 8 fix means you just fly off the handle,
Right.
and like often because that separateness thing is there, it doesn't feel like a big deal when something happens sometimes,
You're
like
not getting as hooked by a lot of things.
yeah, I'm not getting as hooked. And so like sometimes my friend Brant can like he will just like somebody was like fucking rude to him, or like he just lost his patience with somebody, and he's not like a big guy, but he will get in their face and throw them out of the bar and make it a thing because his one is sense of like literally decorum, basically, like
Hmm.
gets offended. And it's but that distinction that you made, Emeka, is like the ready to go thing, and it's different than a 7 fix. That there's like a ready to go. I get overwhelmed and tired and stuff like this. But what I've seen with 8 fixers is that there's this sort of like um, ready to go all in kind of thing that happens. Like, and I don't know how to kind of put more body around that.
It's maybe trusting your animal
Yeah,
responses.
yeah, because it's not like a 7 fix thing where a 7 is like I will. It's like it's not as anticipatory as a 7 fix.
Yeah.
Like I'll see my like 7 fixers be down for something, or ready for something, but there's a lot of this is going to be great,
Yes.
or this is like you can see the excitement before. Whereas
Hmm.
I think with an 8 fixer, they just kind of like they push into something.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the right wording for it because it's not just like aggression,
No,
but
it's not. Yeah, no, it's
No.
blunt.
yeah, it feels like, I guess in the body with eight there is an expectation that there's always going to be action, and or creating action or expecting action, and because it's reactive there's this chaotic piece to it where this is going to be something unexpected. um I don't know if that's getting at it, but
There's something
I
there.
I don't fully understand what the difference between that and an 8 is.
oh, the eight fix versus eight.
Yeah, like what you're describing just kind of sounds like an 8 to me.
Well, I think we're trying to get at people who have an eight. How do you make the distinction between people who have an eight fix versus people who don't, who might have other aggressive tendencies? Like, how do you pinpoint what makes someone have an eight fix versus not?
Oh, okay. So you're not technically saying an 8 fix versus an 8. You're saying an 8 fix versus a not 8 fix.
Yeah. Like, how
Yeah.
do
Okay,
we?
okay. Okay,
Yeah,
because I was
like
like, this all sounds the same. I don't know what you're
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it is the same.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, no one's gonna mistake me for an 8 by any means.
Right.
you know,
Right.
but like, I mean, given if there's like a delivery system for 4-5ness, it's not gonna come through a 1ish
Hmm.
precision filter, and it's not gonna come through a 9 like dark fog. It's gonna come through kind of a blunt sort of way, and even um yeah, like Emeka said about if I like get hyped on something like Egypt or whatever the fuck it is, I just kind of go off and I just kind
Go
of
off.
yeah.
Yeah, what am I noticing with people who have eight fixes? It just feels like such a different universe from the other nine and one fixes. Like it feels like with nine, there's this kind of needing permission to really fully take up space in the gut, in the body center.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And with one, there's this sense of I've got to fit within a narrow set of requirements and of what I think the right way to be is. And what I feel with eight is just like swagger that I'm just going to let myself be whatever it is that I am right now. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's, you can say that about core eights in general. It's like what you see is what you get. And so with an eight fix, it's kind of like who I am. This is it. This is it. I'm not holding back. I'm gonna turn the volume up. I've got no shame. Here it is.
One fix is also kind of like it's got a teacher element. It's like showing you how things should be done and how people should be conducting themselves. I mean, you can even see it like with Prince, weirdly enough,
Yes.
like with
Yes.
471, he's like, you know, you're doing it wrong and you need to know that you're wrong. And it's got
Mhm.
a, yeah, it's pedantic. It doesn't have that blunt force trauma thing of eight or the just steamroller thing of eight.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's something too, is that people often just assume a one fixer is gonna be like really buttoned up and uptight, and like Brenda speaking to is not like he's got his uptight areas, but he does not come across that way. And
Hmm.
so it's important not to get too caught up in like what a one fix uh stereotype is. Like for both for the eight fix, it's like it's not just mistaking expressions of aggression as an eight fix, and not interpreting all one fixers as just being like really uptight or teacherly or something, or like librarians or something like that.
Hmm.
It's
Mhm.
like Jamira, who was here for the call a long time ago, has a one fix, and
Yeah.
there's a precision there, but man, she does not come across as like uptight. She does not come across as um prudish or anything like that. Like she's, anyway,
Hmm.
it's just, I think a lot of the work of learning the Enneagram is like unpacking all the stereotypes that just immediately pile up as soon as you hear about a one or a two or a three or whatever.
Hmm. And because we're running out of time, I want to hit just any of the uh, misconceptions that that we've seen so often with eights that come up all the time on these forums and on Instagram or whatever. And one of the ones that I wanted to emphasize on the shift call is that eights are self amputating and in some ways dehumanizing themselves, and people are also doing that to the description,
Mm-hmm.
and they're
Mm-hmm.
not really seeing the humanness of what eights are, to the point where when people who are actually eights up here, people are like, that person can't be an eight because they actually expressed vulnerable feelings, and eights are gonna they're human beings just like anyone else is, and when eights do vulnerability, they're gonna actually do it, like
Yes.
they're gonna
Good point.
go all in. And
Hmm.
so when sometimes people see these big displays from eights of emotionality, and they think, well, that's not eight. It's like that's a human being. And
I
it's like
thought you were a robot.
so it's like this thing of this protector, boss, uh idea that people have of eights it's not realistic. That's not what a human being, or this thing that, even though we're talking about how eights don't give and have issues apologizing, some eights might do that. Doesn't mean that
Right.
they're not incapable of doing that. It's just like there's a type structure, and then there's a human being who's in that type structure. And so that's one of the things I wanted to emphasize is like eights aren't superheroes. They're not here to protect you. They're not
Mhm.
here to like lead you. Like an eights are just initiating. This happens to someone who's in their box and they're initiating.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they're going to be smart or have everyone's best interest in mind. They're eights who are fucking idiots that don't know anything about anything, don't have good leadership skills. Just because you're an eight doesn't make you a good leader,
Right.
And
Right.
so they're just looking at stop idealizing eights. And if you're identifying with this type because it makes you feel strong, that is the definition of not strong.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because, like, even though we like we're talking in very much about type structure, and we're talking very much about like this disconnect from the nurturing function. Like a lot of eights, especially eight women, are very emotionally expressive and
Hmm.
can be very warm. They can be very friendly. They can be very effusive. They don't come across as big and scary. And I mean, maybe some do, but it's like generally like they're human beings, and that's a phenomenon I've observed throughout the whole Enneagram is that kind of like what the type does to themselves, people do to the description of that type. So like 4 over idealizes their own individuality. So everybody identifies with 4 and gets all like, I'm special 'cause I'm a 4. It's like that's what kind of 4s do. 9s neglect themselves, and so people go, 9s are sleepy, and that's it. Like they they get
That's
Yeah.
overlooked.
all they are.
And 3s fear being fraudulent, and so then people are like, the 3s are fraudulent, and then 8s go, I'm really strong, and I don't have these kind of vulnerabilities, and then that's what people project onto them. They project an ego ideal, so like an ego that is an ideal ego, meaning invulnerable and not insecure. But like 8s are very human. I have friends who are 8s. Like we've had 8 women on this call on these podcasts that are very vulnerable and sensitive and have a very
Hmm.
wide ranging emotional life and everything like that. So getting clear on how the type structural phenomenon that we've been speaking to can be can operate within in a vulnerable, sensitive human being. It's really important to understand, and we have to go to these like examples of dictators and things like that to start to exaggerate something so that we can come back to the seeds of it that are in daily life in the eights that you like share a bathroom with or whatever.
Yeah, it's like what eight is in the average person. Like you might work with an eight. It doesn't mean that they are in a leadership position. There are lots of
Right.
eights who will never be in a leadership position because maybe they don't even have it in them to be a good leader. And so this idealization of eights as a boss and um like eights are gonna, because they're assertive types, and if they have any sort of ability, they would naturally end up in a position like that. But to think that everyone has that in them is just not accurate, because there's the person and then there's a type structure, and you can be there's a full range of you know ways that can show up. You can have a Hitler, you can have a Martin Luther King Jr., or you can have a Charles Manson. Like, you get the full range of what a person can be within a type structure. But it's just getting clear when people come to the Enneagram, what does this type structure really mean? And besides, like, how it makes you feel. And some people like to feel that they're strong, and, like sixes and nines who might identify with eight because it's a form of self empowerment. And that's something that I see eights aren't
Hmm.
doing that. Eights kind of like have to discover how much they're doing the unconscious, invulnerable thing. I mean, it's not an external kind of like, oh, I'm trying to be strong. Like
Right.
every eight assumes that everyone is doing the same thing, that everyone is
Hmm.
capable and everyone is separate. That's what eights assume. So there's not much juice there
But very
in the
unconsciously.
yeah. There's not much juice there in the whole strength. I'm strong.
It's also like you don't just get like Hitler's and Charles Manson's and all these other types. You get like this fucking checkout counter girl. You know what I mean? You get
Yes.
Yeah,
you get like just
totally.
somebody's like dad or mom or sister or whatever. You get like like there's H just everywhere. Like I mean not
Right.
everywhere in the sense that they're common, but they're just in all walks of life, and
Hmm.
the need to
Go ahead. Go ahead.
glamorize is just
R-
get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had eights who identified with being super withdrawn because they had some kind of illness or whatever, and they didn't have to do much. They're eights that are just homebodies.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
go to
Hmm.
work every day. Like my sister is an example of an
Hmm.
eight who's I mean, her world's pretty small. She's got her work, and she's just kind of like in her own box, living her life. That's the thing about eights, is like most eights are just minding their own business. And
Yep.
to really like see that anger and see that sort of chaotic aspect, you're really gonna have to get in their box. You're really gonna have to, and they're just assuming that everyone else is minding their own business. And so unless you're standing in the way of an eights, path, they're not going to have any reason to knock up against you. They're not even noticing you. They're not even paying attention to you. That's just kind of what it is. Like eights aren't attachment types. They're kind of like in their own little corner in their box doing their thing. And if you're involved, then yeah, you're going to see that. But if you're not involved, they're not even paying attention to you.
Right. Another thing I want to bring up before we stop this is, we are not saying that there's these mistakes or problems around understanding eight because of sixes and nines or something. And it's not that all sixes and nines are just trying to feel good about themselves and they identify with eight. I think it's very, very hard to me, a lot of my criticisms all go back to like Enneagram teachers and author.
Yeah.
And it
Yes.
is Enneagram is so unconscious and so difficult that it requires a lot of time. So it's like, it's not really, I mean, with some exceptions, it's not really people's fault that the descriptions are bad because these are so unconscious, these structures. It
Mhm.
takes so much trial and error and so much really specialized learning to kind of come to terms with. So, like, I think it's been hard for authors and teachers and whatever to talk about an eight that isn't full of attachment stuff.
Yes.
Just because
Mhm.
attachment is such a strong, just such a ubiquitous force.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
so we're not trying to say like, oh, if you think you're an eight, it's because you're trying to be strong or trying to be blah
Yeah.
blah blah.
Yeah.
Or you're an
Uh,
idiot or something.
you're an idiot. Yeah, no, no.
And
A
we
lot of
blame you.
no, we blame that the Enneagram is what it is, and but also I do, you guys know that I do blame some authors.
Yeah,
Oh, certain
sure.
authors that will
Yes.
remain named.
Yeah. I blame certain authors, and yeah. Anyway, yeah. So that's something I think is really important.
Mhm.
Is that it's very hard to, like, if you don't know a lot of eights, because most people don't know too many eights. You're
Right.
trying to describe an eight. All right, like that person seems like an eight, but maybe this person's an eight, and then what they have in common, maybe one's actually an attachment type versus an actual eight. You're trying to distinguish. Maybe they have an attachment fix. What's eight versus fix? That's really hard. So I mean, part of this whole podcast is just that we're all annoyed with the Enneagram at large and trying to get clearer about it because we're so frustrated with the stuff that's out there. So anyway, just put that in the
Yeah.
atmosphere.
I think
Yeah.
it's always really easy to put these types of just personalities into a cartoon and just call it a day. And I think that's
Mhm.
what a
Yeah.
lot of people have done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's frustrating for someone who's really trying to understand, especially let's just say if you are someone who is an eight or someone who is like a five or a four. If you were to come into the Enneagram and to see some of these descriptions and the way that people identify with these types, and this feedback loop of people identifying with the wrong type and then taking their personal experiences and putting that into um, the type, it can get really confusing and it can get really hard to even find your type. And I don't think it should have taken me as long as it did. Didn't take me that long, but still, like, I think the material should be clear enough that I should have been able to see, oh yeah, that's me. I'm doing that eight thing there. But when I saw the descriptions, I was like, ew, that's literally what I thought. Like, that's not. I don't do that. That's feels
Mm.
cartoonish. It feels like that's not even a real person. Um, and I'm a real person, and so I was like, I'm just a fun guy. I'm a seven. So I completely sidestepped it. And my sister, who is an eight, had the same initial reaction to most eight descriptions. And so I feel like it's just the work that we're doing. It hopefully is to pull the curtain back and show people like this is what the type structure is, and doesn't matter what type it is. If you're idealizing it, if you're coming away from it from coming at it from the perspective of this makes you feel good, it's probably the wrong type.
Yeah, and I wonder, Emeka, if maybe you identified initially with seven from the kind of me first quality of seven.
Oh yeah.
Like, because yeah, like a lot of eight stuff is full of the attachment, like protector, leader type.
Yeah, I didn't see myself as I mean, like I would barely give a fuck about people. Like the
Right.
Enneagram has been a pathway for me to find different ways to empathize with people. So the type seven way of being just seemed that I can identify with that, and so there it just seemed like, oh, an eight is someone who looks out for the underdog. I was like, I'm barely looking out for anybody. Like I'm looking out after I'm looking after people who are kind of in my box, but caring about people is something that I've had to really work on. And I don't think people really fully understand how separate eights can feel, even from themselves. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like
Yes.
that's a huge part of it. It's like
From themselves. Yeah.
most eights might seem big externally, but internally there's really a lot of disconnection from people in general, and and something I've spoken to here, being in in a relationship where I'm with the love of my life, and that feeling of severing even from what's happening, where I can't, and it's still something that comes up every now and then, where I don't feel that connection. I can feel so separate from everyone and everything that it's hard for me to believe that what I'm experiencing, a love, is actually happening to me.
Mhm.
And so I don't see that in any description. Like just that
Yeah.
sense of separation that eights feel, even from themselves and from everyone around them.
It's a body type dissociation.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really key. All right.
But yeah, I think we hit on some good stuff there.
Yeah, I think that was really good.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, we'll see
Well,
how many fucking sixes or tough guy sixes we piss off with this episode.
yeah.
Should be
I
entertaining.
I had my friend Ben, who I think I've told you guys about. He visited, like we were friends in college, and he's a 6'8'3",
Okay.
and I realized, like in college, I thought he was social sexual. I realized now he's sexual repressed. And he's gone through a whole fucking journey. But yeah, he was saying that or it was a really beautiful thing he said, where he like realized he'd been playing this like tough guy thing for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, you know what, now what comes to me is I just realized like I'm like a knight that just like I am ready to serve. And I always had this image in my mind of being like the knight appointed by the king to do something. And he's like, I've tried to resist that for so long. And now I realize like I just have to find the right thing to serve. And I was like,
Yeah.
that was like really powerful and beautiful.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because it's I feel like sixes are a lot more identified with being tough than eights are, and that sense of needing a noble enough cause to serve is what's behind this protect the underdog thing. I mean, because eights are like, I am the cause. It's whatever the fuck I
Right.
decide to do. And it's like that's what ends up happening is eventually it blows itself up into some external cause that some six goes and gives their life on some battlefield because some selfish ass eight somewhere, you know, eights aren't going to be the ones on the front lines. It's just not going to work out that way.
Right.
It's just not
Right.
going to work that way. But it's the sixes that are going to really get into the cause and be like, no, it's my responsibility to do to go and fight this battle.
It might be a good future episode to do. Hashtag you are a six. And talk about this in detail, and like this sense of like of toughness and where it comes from, not as like a, oh, you're just trying to be tough kind of thing, because I think that can be really hard for people to like swallow, but to like really articulate what is toughness and why does it matter, like the fierceness or feisty, all that kind of shit. Like what's it actually, what's the purpose and point of it, and kind of like get around people's self judgment about like that they can recognize that, yeah, I do want to be tough.
Mhm.
Like that's a thing I think that with people identifying with eight that aren't eights is like they do want to be tough and they know it, and they think, oh, it's got to be just because like as an eight I am tough, rather than like I think sometimes it gets framed with six as it's a compensation for how fearful and cowardly they are.
Oh.
And that can be true, but there's this other thing that has to
No.
come in that people have to understand about six that actually is brave. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right. Like my experience of sixes that they're super tough. Like in some ways,
Yes.
I think tougher than eights. Like there's
Attachment is tough as fuck.
yeah.
I
Like
was
that's
gonna
that.
say, I personally think attachment is the toughest, but hey,
No,
that's
no,
just
you're
me.
right. Like the sense of self martyrdom and the willingness to stick through it. That's just not eights aren't doing that. I mean, there's some really tough eights out there, and that sense of being able to delete portions of reality, delete their own fear and delete their own pain. Um, but what I see with attachment is the sense of responsibility, or the sense of I have a goal and it's a worthy goal and it's worth fighting for and it's worth dying for.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
sense of toughness It's like I have my people that I'm going to protect. That that is coming from that attachment place. And I mean, there are a lot of sixes that are really tough and really brave. And I think if they could see where it's coming from, they can, really appreciate it for what it is instead of like putting it
Right.
on eight, which is really not as noble or applaudable as people make it out to be. If you
Right.
really get acquainted with actual eight, you'd be disappointed with these descriptions, is what I'm saying.
It's like,
And there's-
John, I think you said you described the hexad types as kind of brittle, like so
Yes.
they could break, whereas attachment types, they're bendable, but they're going to snap back.
Right.
Mhm.
Exactly. I think that'd be really good and like kind of like redeeming, like because I think that there's a lot of bullshit that gets in the way of people being able to like embrace being a six or embrace being a whatever. It'd be cool if like people could not see six as just like trying to be brave because they're so afraid. That
Mhm.
sucks.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't find that to be very true.
No.
Yeah, it's I don't feel like it's an overcompensation. That's not that hasn't been. I mean, there are types that come on forums and maybe they're identifying with eight for that month and they're starting shit people, and it's very obvious that they're trying to show off that they're tough, or people who come in and talk about how they do martial arts and how if you do MMA or whatever, then that means you're an eight or
Right.
something
No,
like
I mean
that.
I see like the warrior archetype being much more six than it is
Mhm.
eight because it's usually a warrior for something. It's like I'm gonna be a tool for something I believe in to defend something. All right, well, I need to get going.
Same.
All right, dudes.
All right,
All right. Bye.
Okay,
see y'all next week.
later.
Bye.
Bye.